All right. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to our panelists and those of you who have joined this webinar. We appreciate your time. We understand that it is obviously a very busy time of year with the budget speech having taken place last week, but we wanted to make, yesterday, sorry. But we wanted to make sure that we're able to wrap up this webinar series within the month of February so that all the information and the recordings can be added to the portal, which hopefully Hopewell will tell us about towards the end of the session. So today's webinar is focused on covering commissions, which has been a very important and big part of court reporting in South Africa, or legal reporting in the broader sense. Many of you obviously would have covered the Commission of Inquiry into state capture, but there have also been a number of other commissions of inquiry, such as the JIBA Commission that looked at issues within the NPA. A few years ago, I covered a commission looking into the fitness of the now Minister of Police, Begicele, to be police commissioner. And of course, there's the Marikana Commission. And we thought that it would be important to focus on one of the chapters that is in the new a revised manual, which is chapter 6, which focuses specifically on court reporting. I just want to introduce everyone to our panelists. Well, actually, first we're meant to have opening remarks from Hopewell, but we've got Amina Frenze from who's one of the SANEF council members, and she's opted to do the opening remarks instead. Hopewell will be addressing us towards the end of the webinar, just to give us an update on where things stand with the portal, as well as where how and when you can access it. Amina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Diane, and good morning to the panelists, and good morning to all our participants. This is a great day. It's a very, very exciting day, and the last in our series of reporting the courts. Last week, we had the privilege of getting an insight into the Chief Justice, the Office of the Chief Justice. And today we will continue along the vein of the experience, the expertise, what needs to be looked out for in terms of covering commissions, as Diane had indicated. So a warm welcome from me. I'm a council member, founder member of SANEF, and I'm also with the Institute for the Advancement of Journalism. So this is a great collaboration between SANEF and the IAJ in a webinar series. And I just want to wish everyone all the best. Hopewell will repeat where the recordings can be found of the previous webinars. And yes, I'm looking forward to this session, and all the best, everyone.
Thank you so much, Amina. And we have quite an exciting panel for you guys today. I was quite excited when we were able to actually get our wish list of people, because you often come up with a list and you're not sure whether you're going to be able to get all of them. Just for those who don't know, myself and Candice Bailey, who's my co-facilitator, we are journalists who've been working in court and crime reporting for several years. We've been facilitating these 5 webinars for the SA National Editors Forum, and I'm a member of SANEF, and we're also the co-directors of our Intateli Media, which is partnered with the IAJ to bring you this series. Now, in terms of our panelists, we have Bongiwe Gambu, who is, as many of you might know from interacting with her, she is the current spokesperson for the MEC of Infrastructure and Development in Gauteng. But she has a long history as a media practitioner, having previously been a spokesperson for the communications minister. And also, I think the part where we interacted with her quite a lot, Candice and myself, would have been in the Commission of Inquiry that was looking into the fitness of the NPA, members of the NPA, including Nomzamo. This took place a few years ago, along with prosecutor Lawrence Mokgoro, and there was an inquiry that was done into whether they were fit to hold office. She was the sort of main point of contact for journalists in that inquiry, and we'll be discussing some of the logistical issues that she had to deal with, and also hopefully getting some advice from Bongiwe for journalists on how they can better manage that landscape. We're also joined by Erin Bates, a current colleague. Erin Bates is a legal writer at Business Day, and she's also worked at enca.com and at a number of other online publications. Erin has taken the leap of becoming a legal writer, working in a space that many others fear and many gravitate towards politics, but I think she's finding that there is quite an interaction between politics and legal issues as she's navigating the space, and we'll speak to her about some of her experiences. We're also joined by Nomzamo Zondo from the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, also known as SERI. Now, many of you will probably remember Nomzamo from discussions relating to the Marikana Commission of Inquiry. That's definitely where I remember her from. The SERI is a nonprofit organization that has been tracking developments relating to the Marikana Commission of Inquiry, and her perspectives will really look at the effectiveness of commissions of inquiry and also the long-term impacts that they do or don't have. And of course, we're also joined by Advocate Paul Pretorius. He is the head of the legal team at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, also known as the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. This inquiry also became a feature of many of our lives over the past few years. We know that the final report is still coming out, but there are some great insights that we're hoping to get from Advocate Pretorius about his work at the Commission, as well as how journalists can navigate the space of covering commissions and some of the legalities behind that. I now hand over to Candace Bailey, who will be leading the discussion, and just some housekeeping for some of you who might have joined a bit late. We will be taking questions in the chat, so feel free to pop your questions in there. I'll be monitoring those while Candace continues the discussion, and I'll just alert the panelists. Panelists, feel free, if you have capacity, to also answer the questions in the chat box. There might be some that are specifically focused at your work, and you can feel free to ask questions there.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you for the wonderful introduction to our panelists. And once again, thank you, panelists, for taking the time out to chat to us today and to provide your insights into how we as journalists can cover commissions better. I hope that we are able to have a frank and decent conversation, and that the journalists will be able to get some good tips going forward that will really help them. So just to start framing the conversation, I think I'd like to just start off with Advocate Paul Pretorius. Advocate, we know that I want the journalists to understand sort of just how commissions come about and where they started. So we know that the Constitution under Section 84 tells us that the president has the prerogative to set up commissions of inquiry, but that there are also various acts that people can, under which commissions can be started. There's the Commissions Act, there's a National Prosecutor, NPA Act, in fact, and there's also a Provincial Act. Can I just ask you to give us a little bit of a framing in terms of these acts and how, and what is the legal framework around a commission? Let's put it that way. Are you there, Advocate?
Thank you. I haven't done a survey of all the legislation dealing with commissions of inquiry or inquiries, and will concentrate only on the Presidential Commission, of which there are plenty. By the way, I've just done a quick overview. There's climate, there's Fourth Industrial Revolution. There are a number of these commissions on the go, or recently concluded. As you correctly point out, a commission is appointed by the president, but it's important to understand that a commission has no powers other than powers to run its own business and to compel witnesses and obtain documents and summons persons to give evidence, to hold evidence in camera and the like, those internal powers. But external to that, the public is really not well informed as to what the powers of a commission are. Commission has no powers. It's merely a constitutional aid to the president to enable the president then with Parliament to take action. So once the Commission produces its report, that's the end of the story, and it's up to the President then to direct action. There is an act, the Commission's Act of 1947, which is wholly outdated. Our Commission structure is internationally way behind. You know, in other countries, they have a centralized commission, a royal commission, for example, in the UK. And all commissions of inquiry are administered from one source, instead of each commission at huge cost and hugely inefficiently having to start from scratch, to set up infrastructure, to appoint secretariats, to obtain premises, to obtain materials. And that's one of the things personally that I'm going to, outside of the Commission, do some work on for the President's office. There are regulations that have been published under the Commissions Act. The important one for journalists, I think, is Regulation 11.3, which deals with the prohibition on publication of matters before they become public knowledge. And I'll deal with that in detail in a moment, because there was a long engagement between the Commission and SANEF and Media Monitoring Africa and other institutions as to an agreed protocol to deal with this central issue. Then there are the terms of reference. Of course, these are the stuff and character of the Commission of Inquiry, its mandate as to what it is to investigate and make recommendations on. Our terms of reference are quite short. Our evidence was quite long, but the terms of reference do constitute the mandate. And then there would be a number of directives and rulings that should be collated by any person wishing to follow the Commission, because these deal with how the rules are interpreted and applied, how witnesses are dealt with, how evidence is dealt with. And then finally, this is not a legal provision, but commissions now are held in public and normally have a website where all the evidence appears. And the general rule, there are a number of issues that arise out of the operation of the Commission, but what distinguishes the State Capture Commission from others and makes it different from others in many respects is its volume. The size of the Commission itself and the amount of work that it had to get through. The Commission comprises the Secretariat, which is normally the point of contact for any journalist or anyone really wishing to give evidence or make any inquiry. Of course, informally, as you know, you will develop your own contacts within a Commission of Inquiry. There's the legal team, there's the investigative team, and then there's the chair, of course. Now, the chair of the Commission has the power really to organize the Commission. The chair may be the contact point, it may be the Secretariat, and the secretary would then give it to the chair, and the chair would delegate who should answer a particular query. Each commission is different. There's no set rule. It's really up to the chair. And it would be a good idea at the appointment of any commission to contact the chair just to find out what the press protocol should be. One of the most important issues in relation to reporting on the activities of a Commission of Inquiry is, of course, the question of what can you publish and when can you publish it. And I'll deal with that now, and then I'll take any questions that you may have. Mm-hmm. Regulation 11.3 is at one level quite clear. In its implementation, like most laws, it becomes hazy and unclear. But the essence or the intention of 11.3 is that no investigative work of the Commission may be published before it becomes public in an open hearing. And the intention of that is to allow the investigators the scope to investigate before the statement is actually prepared and made public. Now, of course, that may be simple in concept, but what happens is, firstly, documents are leaked. The question is, what can you do then in relation to Regulation 11.3, which wasn't always followed in the past 4 years in the life of the Commission, and did create some tensions between the press and the Commission. What do you do, for example, if a witness says, I'm going to the Commission and I'm going to give them the statement, here it is? What do you do in that case? What do you do when a witness says, no, all I'm going to do is give a report that's already in the public domain, but it is going to the Commission? So the protocol that was offered by the Commission to Media Monitoring Africa in 2019 is the following. Firstly, a document that is already in the public domain before it is submitted to the Commission may be published. A document that is intended for submission to the Commission but is already in the public domain may be published. A document that is not already in the public domain and is intended for submission to the Commission may not be published without compliance with Regulation 11.3. Regulation 11.3 has an exception. It says you can go to the chair and the chair can allow its publication, which has happened before. Fourthly, a document that has already been submitted to the Commission and was not already in the public domain at the time of its submission to the Commission may not be published without compliance with Regulation 11.3. These may sound repetitive, but there's subtle differences, and I can let you have a copy of this for distribution. The publication or dissemination of any document that has been leaked or stolen from the Commission, and this happened both from within the Commission and outside of the Commission from our witnesses, is prohibited by Regulation 11.3 unless the chairperson's permission for publication is obtained. And sometimes the chair would condone such publication. Regulation 11.3b does not apply to a witness in respect of his or her own statement. So the decision there, I think, may have gone beyond the intention of Regulation 11.3, but it was decided that if a witness says, I'm giving evidence to the Commission and I'm going to release my own statement to the Commission, that would be permitted. But that's problematic, of course, because not all witnesses have the same good and kind intent in relation to the objectives of a presidential commission, particularly this one.
So Advocate, what I'm taking is that we need to ask the Commission chair if it's not a document that's in the public domain yet. We need to go for and ask for permission to publish this, to publish a statement. I think that's what I can pull in generally from your explanation around Regulation 11.3.
Yeah, unless it's in the public domain and unless the chair gives permission, it cannot be published.
Thank you, Advocate. I think that's very helpful for journalists because it's helpful for us to understand when we should be going and what we should be doing with, especially, I mean, I think journalists often get information all the time. People always want to share information with us in instances like this. I want to pause you there if I can, Advocate, and just jump to Erin, because I think Erin, as a practicing journalist, may have had this type of scenario thrown at her where she may have had leaked documents. And I want to sort of just ask you to relate your experiences, Erin, and tell us if you were able to follow through on the Advocate's sort of explanation in terms of 11.3, or how did you handle this specific case?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that came up repeatedly throughout the Commission as long as I was sort of chiefly on it. So that was a good 2 years of the Commission's work from the beginning of 2018, when it was regulated by then President Jacob Zuma, all the way until the beginning of 2020. And, you know, I think one of the issues here was that it was a bit of a moving target in terms of how journalists, one, just practiced in dealing with these sorts of documents, and two, then what were the formal structures around it following engagements between the Commission and the likes of SANEF. And to be honest, just hearing all that detail again from Advocate Paul Pretorius is a reminder that there were engagements to which I wasn't that privy at the time. So there may be an issue there around engagement with people, you know, on the floor of the Commission venue, and more dialogue to make sure that we're up to speed on changes like that. But practically speaking, documents would find their way into inboxes, into, you know, online messaging services on people's phones, you know, myself and colleagues. Of course, it's all the basics of journalism. Why am I being sent this document? Who is sending it to me? With what agenda? At what point in an evidence process is this being put before me? And I think in some ways it comes down to the principle of, it's a false dichotomy, but do you want to be first or do you want to be right? And through covering the Commission comprehensively, I just sort of was quite conservative and decided best to kind of press pause on documents until they'd been through the formal process of the Commission. It's a matter of appetite for risk. It's a matter of deciding whether you're willing to stick your neck out as a publication or a news outlet, whether in TV or radio. And it certainly was something that we heard about, not only from within our own kind of seats at the Commission, but also from the chair himself.
Thank you. I mean, and I think to Advocate as a point about this document being distributed, I think it would be really helpful to have it. And Advocate, I would welcome you to send it to us. We can put it on the portal, on the SANEF portal, so that we actually have a document that people can reference. I think the most frustrating thing for journalists is if you don't know and you don't know where to go to ask. Sometimes, you know, it's helpful to have that document. I want to just bring Bongiwe in here on the other side of things. I mean, I think Bongiwe, as the spokesperson of a commission, and you weren't part of the Zondo Commission, but you were part of the Jiba Commission, which was also quite controversial and a difficult commission to handle. From your side as a communications person, as a spokesperson, what are some of the challenges that you see, you know, dealing with the media and dealing with the sort of the outer end of the commission?
Thank you so much, Candice. Wow. When I was preparing for this webinar, and thank you very much for this opportunity, I had to shoot my eye back to the very first time, and mine was in 2012, which means the work started in 2011. And it was exactly 10 years ago that we published the report into the fitness to hold office by the then Police Commissioner, Begicele, who has now miraculously become a police minister. And I say so because I hold certain views about how the country and citizens are unaware of their power as far as commissions, boards of inquiry are concerned. I found that there are a couple of media organizations that sent their big guns. And when I say big guns, I mean men and women who understood the basics of covering such a board of inquiry. And I'll take both of them really so that I can paint a picture of how starkly different my experiences were. The fact that when we started with the one in 2011/2012, there was a very strict adherence to certain things. And we had a technical media briefing. And for me, a technical media briefing is critical in setting the tone for the reporting and reminding journalists and reporters of the terms of reference. Because then it says, this is our foundation, this is why we're here, this is what we are looking for, this is what with the parameters within which you can operate. And once you go outside of this, this is where we will have to go after you. And also for journalists to be reminded that a board of inquiry is different from a commission of inquiry. And I'm glad that Advocate Pretorius is here, because I have had dealings with him both on the Moloi Board of Inquiry as well as Mokgoro Board of Inquiry, because those are the legal terms that that they were put out as, not Jiba Inquiry or Commission, not Inquiry, because it is the judge or the presiding officer whose name is used under that. But I found that when it was the big guns, even the reporting would show that, okay, so this person understands the intricate, the dynamics of this particular legal setup and what it aims to achieve. And the fact, of course, that we do not have, as boards of inquiry, subpoena powers, which basically means that we relied on the goodwill of witnesses. And that is why my job as a media practitioner in both those spaces was to ensure that we invite people who may have evidence, and we say oral or written evidence by this time, and we keep it open, and we allow for everyone to come through with whatever information that they had. And that really worked, and it helped, especially with the first one. With the second one, unfortunately, I found that there had been some difference in reporting, in the sense that there were more media organizations that were sending junior reporters than those that were sending the big guns. And the big guns are people who have sunk their teeth into issues, not really about experience only, but sunk their teeth into issues that when they come to you and they sit down with you early in the morning before the proceedings start, then they say, yesterday, this is what happened today. What are you guys expecting within, of course, the legal frameworks that Justice Mokgoro, for instance, would have set out for us to operate in. And because of the fact that the media decided when and where they would send their big guns, I found that even the ordinary person on the street did not realize, understand, and comprehend their contribution, their responsibility, but also what it is that they should be expecting out of a board of inquiry. Because I am so happy that Advocate Pretorius came before, and he set out really the landscape for us to understand that once a commission has made recommendations, that's it. But what is sitting there is the power of the ordinary person to say, hang on, we used so much money and we spent so much resources. Now, when are you as a minister or the president for that matter, implementing these recommendations? And we want to see them implemented. We want to see people to be held accountable. And for me, that's where I believe the media could, lastly, really strengthen their reporting, that understand that you have to be impartial, resist the temptation to sensationalize things, but also remember that commissions of inquiry as well as boards of inquiry are about ordinary people. We have to respect the rights of those people. As much as we want to report, we also need to remember that those people have families, they have children, and they have certain rights that are allowed to them by the Constitution, but also use the opportunity, of course, as I said, to educate.
Bongiwe, thank you. I think we're going to circle back later to getting some tips for the journalists. And I think you started sort of telling us a bit about how people can get better at it. I mean, I think it's also important for us to note that the landscape has changed a bit in the last 12 years, or let's say 7 years since in fact, the media landscape more has changed since between those the two periods of your commissions. I mean, for one, we've got smaller newsrooms, we've got budgetary constraints, we've got, you know, we don't necessarily have as many big guns, we don't have as many experienced people in newsrooms. So without, I mean, I think we need to balance that to say that, you know, and I think that's why our session today about covering commissions really is important, because I think we also want to empower young journalists, empower those in the beginning. If you have to cover a commission, what is it that you should think about? And I think what you've said is quite clear, you know, understanding the terms of reference. Advocate Paul, before I go to Nomzamo, and I wanted to chat because Bongiwe, you were saying something really nice, that commission's about people. But Advocate Pretorius, maybe I can just go back to you very quickly about the Zondo Commission. I mean, I think the Zondo Commission was it was probably our biggest commission. It's the longest running commission. It's got the most, and as you said, rightly so, the volume of documents. Were you able to have that technical briefing session that Bongiwe was talking about at the beginning? And if not, do you think that it would have been important to help journalists understand those terms of reference and the fact that the commission is a fact-finding sort of mission?
Right in the beginning, beginning of 2018, maybe beyond ordinary mortal memory, but the chair of the commission did hold a public briefing and took questions, and perhaps not enough, but did have several, some controversial press briefings. So yes, it was done. The detail of the commission's work and its scope was something that the investigators and legal team, under the direction of the chair, worked on over the years. So it was never something that could be explained. It grew, it changed, it expanded, it retracted. But I wanted to say something else about the journalist profession. You know, the work of the commission and the commission itself would never have occurred at all without the journalist profession's work over the past 10 to 15 years. And I think the journalist profession can rightly take credit for that. It's a wonderful asset to our country. Now, apart from just saying that, and it should always be recognized, there is the potential for a symbiotic relationship between an active journalist profession and a commission of inquiry. It doesn't have to limit itself simply to the passive reporting of what happens at a commission of inquiry. I have on my shelf here dozens of books emanating largely from journalists dealing with the issues that were dealt with by the commission. We couldn't possibly cover everything. We've hardly scratched the surface, I'm afraid, of those matters covered in the terms of reference. There are vast swathes of information out there which journalists have that can supplement the work of a commission. Now, I'm not au fait with the ethics of activist journalism and passive journalism and pure reporting journalism. That's all science and politics beyond my scope. You would have more principled knowledge of what a journalist can and can't do. But my sense is that there is a lot that journalism can add to the work of the commission. The commission is not the complete picture by a long way. It wasn't in the beginning, it's not now, and it won't be for the future.
True.
I love that. I love that, Advocate, because I mean, I think that that's so true. And it speaks exactly to the point about, you know, the commission's about people. It's about trying to understand. It's in the public interest. And how do you then take all those issues out? And like you're saying, there are lots of issues. At the State Capture Commission, I mean, the first report alone was 800 pages. So, you know, there's lots of information that you can follow up on, that you can look into. So thank you for that. I see Erin, your hands raised, and I see Bongiwe as well. Erin, I'm going to go to you first.
Thank you. So I think in some ways, the fact that we're having this discussion within the context of covering the courts itself speaks to the blurring of an understanding of what commissions actually do, because they're quasi-judicial processes. And we heard right at the start of this discussion, commissions don't have any powers. Well, they have the powers to litigate, for example. We've seen applications right up to the Constitutional Court. But yes, these commissions, the Zondo Commission, for example, not going to land people directly in orange overalls behind bars. And so I think, we need to be quite careful, because that is something that has sort of persisted in coverage of perhaps, especially the Zondo Commission, in the public domain. What is it going to do? When are we going to see arrests? All that sort of thing. And so trying to really understand what is a commission. And that itself is a contentious point, because yes, as much as it is about the people, it is also an apparatus of state. And we've seen that tension, for example, at times in the fact that the Zondo Commission was signed into effect by the former president, who was then a very, reluctant witness, let's be honest. And then also the current president has had appearances at the commission in his capacity as the head of the governing party, then also as the head of state. And there's been that very tense or kind of tenuous relationship between him as a witness, him as the authority in the executive, who's kind of, the head honcho if you want to get an extension, and you might have an opponent in court, issues around budget, that kind of thing. And so I think one of the things to consider broadly in terms of commissions in the country is the idea of commissions as an apparatus of state or statehood, or as a kind of, architecture that speaks to political issues at a time, and a need to perhaps sometimes placate the public, or at least be seen to be doing something. And that's not to be dismissive about the immense work that commissions do. I mean, Candice, you've spoken about the volume of the report, just the first session of it, or the first segment. And Bongiwe will know from her own work on commissions. And so there's a huge data set you get from that. And I think just to kind of pull things back, if you will, right to the start of democratic dispensation, the Zondo Commission is not our biggest commission by any stretch of the imagination. Look at the Truth and Reconciliation.
I want to pause you. I want to pause you because I see you going on. I want to bring in Nomzamo and Bongiwe, if you don't mind. And I see that your hand raised. I think you want to flag a question. But before we get there, I want to bring in Nomzamo, purely because I think that Nomzamo brings in a very different perspective around commissions. She's as Siri, they were representing a vulnerable group, if I can put it that way, in the commission. And I mean, I think I want to chat to you, Nomzamo, about the effectiveness of the commission. And I mean, your experiences, and kind of speaks to what Erin is talking about, a commission being an apparatus of state versus, something that actually helps people. Nomzamo, are you there?
I'm here, Candice. Thank you so much. And so you rightly point out, Seri was representing victims in the Marikana Commission Inquiry, who were themselves not recognized as a necessary party in the commission when the commission started, and had to fight to participate in the commission. And in our experience, after the families sat in the Marikana Commission Inquiry, they were actually more committed to pursuing it, exactly because they had information that they could never have learned. They could never have learned motor vans or ordered before the miners had even been on the mountain. There's a lot of information that the commission came out in the commission that the families know that had it not been for that commission, they would never have been aware of. I think when Advocate Pretorius said the commission has no power, the commission is the authority on the narrative on the specific issue. So if we look at Marikana, that commission gave us a perspective of what happened. The report, of course, and I want to say this, it was disappointing for the victims, but the report stands as the authoritative account of what happened in Marikana. And for victims, I think it's important to be able to follow the process, but also we know for the majority of the public, the only way they can follow a commission, the only way they can learn about its report is through the media, is through journalists. And in fact, on a daily basis, journalists are collating the information that the public must know about the specific issue. And I think for me, I think Erin and even Bongiwe raised this, it's so important to people consistently attending the commission, because then those journalists are able to tell us what's happening at a specific point in time, but also what's happened, what's happened on a specific issue, and to feed that back to us. And then lastly, on the issue of what happens post the report, exactly because we're journalists who are following the Marikana Commission of Inquiry, which now, I think about 6 years after the report was released, but the story is still being followed. We are able to then ask, if you are allocating 5 million to appoint 12,000 constables in the service, how are you doing that before address reform. And that's because of the work done by journalists.
It's very important. And I mean, I think I like the point of consistency, the fact that we need to follow up on stories. It's sometimes hard for journalists because the news cycle changes so much. There's so much happening in our news cycle. Sometimes we just forget about, going back to the basics, and we need the anniversaries and the days to mark it to remember to go back and ask the questions. But really to ask those difficult questions and to keep on asking them is important. Bongiwe, I want to give you a chance. You had your hand raised up, and then Diane, and then I see Advocate Paul's hands also up.
Thank you very much. I remember the very first time I heard about the Lily mine collapse, and I'll tell you why it is so important. And then I started going into the stories behind the people who are still stuck in the belly of the mine. And it is because of the work that the media did that someone followed. When someone sits on a story persistently, and it doesn't matter that this person has been in the sector for long, but this person decides that I am going to convince my editors and I'm going to be allowed to follow the story. And they gave us the story, they gave us the ages, they gave us the children of these young men and women who are still stuck in the belly of the earth. 1,870 odd days later, their bodies have still not been recovered. But the media keeps that story alive. On the other side, though, it is the responsibility also of the ordinary people to mobilize in such a beautiful constitutional democracy to ask the questions and demand answers. And the same has to happen for me when we talk about commissions of inquiry. But the one thing that just sprung into my head was when Erin said that commissions are state apparatus, and they are. They report to the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. And the latter part, which is constitutional development, I believe is where the department and the state as a whole is failing us. Because when you have a department that is deliberate and intentional about communicating and educating, then you can see the correct change in the landscape, and also people starting to act on that information. I used to work at the National Credit Regulator, and a huge part of my work was consumer education. And because of that, many more people understood their rights, and they were able to come to the National Credit Regulator and say, this bank, this creditor, this machonista has taken my card and stuff like that. But I was just wanting to demonstrate the power of knowledge and information, and how an institution, a department, an organization can use that to educate in a constitutional democracy so that the ordinary person knows what to do with that information. Because at one point, the Zondo Commission...
Our time is running. So I'm very cognizant of time, so I'm going to stop.
No, we're good.
Please forgive me, but I want to, Diane, I see that there's a question. I think that this will be helpful for framing our discussion going forward.
Okay. So the question is, and thank you, Ferial Haffiji, for this question. What would the panelists consider the best case coverage of a commission's report? There's actually 3 questions in one here. How do we do it well and in a way that does justice to the important process? This is now coverage of the report. Also, how do we deal with a public that thinks a commission can jail the corrupt? And I think that speaks to what Advocate Pretorius was speaking about. Perhaps we can break this up a little bit. And I could ask Advocate Paul, if you could perhaps tackle the issue of the dealing with the public and the best case scenario for the report. And maybe Nomzamo, if you can talk to, also just doing justice to the coverage of the report, because that also was something that came up in the Marikana Commission. So I'll hand to Advocate Pretorius first.
There is an expectation in the public, Candice, that commissions should, yes, actually prosecute and jail people, and that should be the outcome. But there's an important hiatus between the report of the Commission, which of course should be summarized and clearly communicated to the public in order to have maximum effect, and what happens thereafter. That hiatus has been short-circuited by an amendment to 11.3, where the Commission is giving its information and its personnel and skills directly to the NPA. So that's been short-circuited and is already happening, but that's unusual. I just want to make 2 points. And Nomzamo alerted me to this in what you said. Thank you. When I say the Commission has no formal powers, and the public should know that, that is correct. They can't arrest and prosecute and the like. They can do search and seizures, but that's all part of its investigative work. That doesn't mean to say a Commission has no effect, as the speakers have said. And what I think the great achievement of the Zondo Commission is that it's had a vast impact on public knowledge, perceptions, and what exists in the mind of the South African populace about what is happening in this country. So when I say no powers, I don't mean no effect. Forgive me, I should have clarified that. And then a question for the journalists. I'm now taking my Commission hat off and I'm burying it. So this you can attribute to me as a person. The question that I've always had in my mind is, what is the political purpose of the Zondo Commission? What is its purpose? And that's something that doesn't have a simple answer. I think I may be a cynic. I've always been a cynic, but its purpose and its effect are quite different things. I do think it's had a very, very salutary effect on South African society, as the speakers have emphasized in other contexts. The last thing I want to say is that the Commission is doing a lot of work with its information. There is rooms full of information that won't find its way into the report, to catalogue and make that available as a resource. So it's not the end. There's a lot of work still to be done by the Commission in order to preserve its work and make it useful for investigation, whether academic or journalist or otherwise.
I find that very interesting, Advocate. In fact, I was about to say to you, because you were saying that, you know, there's no effect, but there's also the effect on the public that it's been given information. You know, transfer of information, knowledge transfer of information is critical in terms of people knowing. Just having access to information really helps people to be able to make more better informed decisions. I want to hand over to Nomzamo just to answer the second part of that question. Thank you so much for your answer, Advocate. I think it's been so helpful. Nomzamo?
Thanks, Candice. I think the one thing that's interesting, and I'm drawing here from our experience on Marikana, is pulling out the political issues that are raised in the report, right? The relationship between lawmen and SAPS, the massacres, how the police responded post the massacre, just at the level of even accepting responsibility. And when you look at the report, you need to draw from the report the issues that are important for South Africa going into the future, number one. And then we need to look at the recommendations. So if you look at the Marikana Commission of Inquiry report, there were recommendations that should have been implemented immediately, right? Banning the use of R5s. That didn't happen. Reporting on the reports, at the very least, must follow what's happened to the recommendations. At the very least, must follow whether the reports are released into the public domain. At the very least, must look at whether there's been institutional change on the different institutions or departments that are affected by that report. And I think that is a long-term project, but it's a project that will be important if we want to justify the use of public resources. As I've said, for the Marikana families, they are grateful because they had the information. But we still need to ask, as a country, are we happy that after over 150 million rand spent, what do we have to show for that? And I think journalists are well placed to raise those questions every now and again.
That's helpful in terms of going forward and how you should report. Follow the recommendations, you know, follow the recommendations and ask the questions about the recommendations and the implementation. I like that, Nomzamo. It's very practical help. Erin, I see your hands up, and then Diane. I'm not sure if your hand, it's an old hand or a new hand, but Erin.
Yeah, thank you. let me put it down. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Nomzamo raising those points, firstly, to speak to the question of what people affected directly by the subject of commissions experience is such an important part of journalists' work. Of course, we've touched on the issue of resources in newsrooms, the juniorization of newsrooms. One of the things that was great for me about being on the commission was that I was there day in and day out. Sometimes, you know, annoyingly kind of dull evidence about procurement, other times listening to the likes of Norma Gigaba, but having that consistency really helped my understanding and my institutional knowledge about the commission. That said, you know, it's the journalism of like, it's a live event, we can just run it. Going to Freda in the Free State, for example, and learning what's happened to the community there because of the Estina project, going to the Optimum Mines in Mpumalanga to see what happened there after the acquisitions and the shenanigans with the Mineral Resources Department. Those are very different kinds of stories. And so I think to Ferial's point, how do we do good coverage of commissions, not only the recommendations and the final reports, but the actual processes? Send your journalists out, give them scope, give them budget, give them support. And I think, you know, it's a testament to that kind of work that Nomzamo is describing in terms of Marikana. Also, just to affirm what she's saying, this year being a 10th anniversary that will not go overlooked by the press, what has happened since. On the commission and coverage of the report, just quickly to Ferial's point, I mean, I think one of the things is to remember that a lot of the report, of course, has been relayed already through the work of the commission. I think how the report and its findings have been communicated has been one of the poorest performances and one of the greatest weaknesses of government's management of the commission and its work. And I know that's kind of between the commission and the presidency, but you can't just thrust a tome, effectively, you know, an encyclopedia's worth of material onto the press and expect us to be able to disseminate it in a way that helps make the point clear to the public on what your recommendations are. There really was a time here, an opportunity here for strategic communication in the interest of the public who bankrolled the commission, which cost over R1 billion, and make sure that we saw what merit, what value came out of it in its findings. You know, and I really think that it's such a great pity and a great sort of injustice to the work of the commission and all the people who were prejudiced by state capture and all the people who came and gave their testimony, some under great personal risk, that there hasn't been a better job of relaying its findings. And I think, you know, that's partly on the point of the commission and partly an issue around journalism and resources. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. I was about to cut you. We are running out of time. And at this point, I want to give everybody just their last 5 minutes, not 5 minutes even, but your closing remarks, your 2 lines to journalists in terms of how you can improve your reporting on commissions. I'm going to start with Advocate Pretorius, and then I'll go to Nomzamo, to Bongiwe, and then to Erin. We'll end up with you.
I see from the comments I might have overstepped the mark with my...
Yes, no, you've made a great point.
Personal, I stress very personal and underline it and put it in caps and bold comment. I just want to emphasize from outside the journalist profession, and I know that I'm speaking to the converted here, that how important the work is. You know, in the last 15 years, it's as if civil society, with some important exceptions, and I'm looking to the top right-hand part of my screen there, Nomzamo, slept through what was happening. It was as if society was asleep. It was the journalists that, and the journalist profession and certain NGOs that kept us awake. We're entering a new phase now. The work is not over just because the commission report on state capture and corruption has been issued. A new, and I think a very dangerous phase of our political existence. And my plea is, let's not sleep through the next 10 years.
That's very interesting. Let's ask the questions and let's use the information that you got. Thank you very much, Advocate. That's very helpful. And I think all the journalists listening are thinking, how do we take this forward and what do we do next? Thank you very much. Nomzamo, I'm handing over to you.
Sure, I mean, I'll just say one line. I think what's been important is engaging the people. And I think the journalists are our only way to do that, making sure the people are aware, as you've said, and then they can act. They can hold the president accountable. They can demand more from Parliament. And I think that's all that we can do. And I think in these commissions, whether you are coming in on the when there's a headliner, or when you are sitting consistently working through it, make sure the information that you send will motivate people to stand up and ask more questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bongiwe?
I would love for journalists to continue to shine the light on issues, especially issues that are affecting us. And you look at the National Prosecuting Authority and its powers, its responsibilities, and the work that it does, and how very few people understand what happens there and why it is important to have people of absolute top caliber in those positions, and how if we don't get it right, then it trickles down to very bad decision making and the service towards justice. But also that may we as journalists continue to ask the ordinary person to do their bit in a constitutional democracy and stand up and ask questions that you had this recommendation. What have you done thus far? Whether it is the fire or life Esidimeni, as well as what Advocate Pretorius is warning us against, the 10th anniversary of the Zondo Commission, that we need to start working now and making sure that all the recommendations are seen to light as soon as possible, including those that were done in Marikana Commission and the many other commissions that have come before. But thank you very much for this opportunity. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Bongiwe. Thank you for, I think, reiterating that, asking the questions about the recommendations. Lastly, Erin?
Okay, so 2 points I think we were given. The first is to note that some of the most meaningful work around state capture, the commission I've covered most extensively, was done before the state of capture report from the public protector was even finalized, and then the commission began. And that is the work of investigative journalists. It's not glamorous, it's not full of razzle dazzle. It's really like crunching through data, through leaks, through emails, through all sorts of things. And I think a plea for newsrooms and for professional bodies in our industry to support that kind of work, not least in light of the kinds of heedings and warnings we've gotten from Paul Pretorius. And the second thing to say is that in terms of commissions, we heard about them being anachronistic because of an act from 1947. Maybe the way that journalists approach commissions is also a bit anachronistic, never mind what happens on Twitter. But I do think we should be pressing for more information as commissions happen, and to not, as I perhaps did to a fault, be quite passive and quite conservative about pushing against commissions and saying, we should be hearing this now. The public has a right to these supporting documents. They're going to be in the public domain at the end of your work anyway. And so I really do think that there is a lot of scope to gain material that will underpin the legitimacy or perhaps the evidence-based work of certain commissions if we have those engagements. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much to all the panelists. I think you guys are wonderful. I think we could continue this conversation for a while. I mean, there's so many points that we haven't touched on. Advocate Pretorius's throwaway remark at the beginning about a centralized commission that they're working on, and how that could actually save lots of money and how it could make commissions more effective. Very interesting. I think the other key points that we can pull out of the conversation is accountability. Asking the questions. I love Advocate Pretorius's line is, do not sleep for the next 10 years, journalists. Stay awake and look at the information that you're getting out of it. And I think he said it with a kind heart in just, you know, there are lots of information. There is lots of information that's coming out, and we need to think about how we use it and how we can ask the questions, like Nomzamo said, ask the questions, hold those in power account. Same, Bongiwe's got the same messages. And I think, Erin, even your message is very similar. You know, use the information to the best of your availability and ask those questions. I think that brings us to the end of our session. Panelists, I want to say thank you to you so much for your time. I think you guys were very thought-provoking and helpful. Everybody, I think, had some great insights into the session today. At this point, I want to hand over to Hopewell Khadebe from SANEF to close off our session. I know that there are some questions that were not answered. Panelists, if you do have a time, there's a question from Dimitri. What role does the media play in holding the president and relevant authorities to account? Maybe we can just answer it in the chat, but I'm handing over to Hopewell so that we can close off the session. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Hopewell, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the way this debate has taken place. Thank you, advocates and all other panelists. You've really left us with food for thought. It's not just about training of what the commissions were about. The training ended up telling us about what's the next step after the commissions, that the job just gets started. When you think that maybe during the commissions itself, there was a lot of work to do with all those investigations and hearings, but follow-ups are just as critical in terms of getting society to get its money's worth as taxpayers after the commission itself. So thank you, Advocate, and all the panelists. So going forward, ladies and gentlemen, for all those who have attended this, we appreciate this. Please do send your comments if there are still topics that you think we could still tackle and go on. Who knows, we may ask Candice and colleagues to come back and give us some more food for thought and maybe challenge us even further. And I'm standing up with more an apology than anything, because we were hoping that by today we would be launching with you, with this ending webinar series, we would be launching the portal. But we have editors who edited the manual. So the more it's supposed to be uploaded, the more they see mistakes, the more they want to re-edit. It's been edited to death, you know, if I may put it that way. So and so with a bit of apology that while all is already there, and we just need to click that button, and then so that people could access these videos and access all this information. But there is still one or two people who says, what about this? Change this, edit that. Believe me, I want to hide under the table, because I really want to just bring them all and throw them in a hole so that we could just upload this. But it's not only up to me. We have to respect the editors who want perfection. So yeah, bear with us. We will invite you to scrutinize it and test it and look at it. I don't want to put a deadline anymore. I did put in a deadline of today. If I do another one, I'll be short. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your participation. Thank you.
Hopefully, I think to help you at the moment, you can access some of the webinar footage from the IAJ site as well as from the Intertelemedia site. We will, once the portal's up, we definitely will share all the resources that have come out of the different sessions over the past 5 webinars. Advocate Pretorius' Regulation 11.3, we'll share that with you on the portal. You'll have access to it to just look through it, have a read through it, and remember some of the things that you need to, processes that you need to follow. Otherwise, I think thank you so much for your time. And have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey, and thank you, Dan. This has been awesome. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nomzamo. Thanks, Erin and Bongiwe. Thanks, Advocate.